Coming up on show 842, how has Porsche's first foray into EVs gone? We've got the sales numbers for the Taycan. Stick around, I'll tell you more. Plus, New York investing megabucks into expanding EVs. Renault ZOE are making a van out of the platform. A big oil company wants EVs to arrive faster. And how Italy is getting on board the EV train. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Saturday, 18th of July. My name is Martyn Lee, and I go through every EV story so you don't have to. And welcome to a brand new Patreon producer. It's you, Nicholas. Nicholas, thank you so much for signing up at producer level. $5 a month makes such a big difference, whether it's 5 or 10 or more, whatever level of support you. If you want to have a look at Patreon, more than welcome. Don't have to. I'll do the show for free. Either way, Nicholas Norson, thank you so much for being a new producer of the podcast. Well, the New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, said yesterday that there's an investment program allocating $750 million to build charging stations and other EV infrastructure as part of the state's long-term goal to reduce emissions. Well, the measure is set to create more than 50,000 charging stations around New York and largely be funded by the state's investor-owned utility companies, with a total budget capped at $701 million through 2025, reports Autoblog. An additional $48.8 million is allocated from a 2017 settlement with Volkswagen, the "you did a very, very bad thing" VW fine, which went towards various states being able to spend money on cleaning up the air, whether it was charging stations or electric school buses for kids, after doing some naughty things with diesel. Well, New York's announcement comes hot on the heels of a similar measure by Florida, which only a couple of days ago announced an $8.6 million investment to expand charging stations. So fantastic news there, with such a high-profile state like New York spending so much money on 50,000 charging stations and spending that money over the next 5 years. Just a huge piece of investment there. I know not every state's got the money to do it, or some of them don't even have the motivation to do it at the moment. They'll have to, though, as everyone's going to be driving EVs sooner or later, like it or not. You know it and I know it. So it's great that New York are kind of getting on board with that. I won't say leading the way, because California does a lot of leading the way, but that's such a massive investment in the infrastructure. It is a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? What do you put in, or the chargers, or do you wait for the cars? Well, of course, the answer is it's neither. You have to both bring new cars to market and build the infrastructure in step. It's not that you can do one or the other first. So it looks like at the moment, if you are in New York and you want to be buying yourself an EV, you're going to have plenty of choice of where to charge it in the future. So the car that I drive, the little French Renault ZOE, now I've got the ZE40, the 41 kilowatt hour pack, but there's a new one. It's a ZE50, 52 kilowatt hour pack, and from that one, they're making a commercial vehicle, a van. Well, it can't really be a van, because, you know, if I say van, you're going to think of like a big panel van or something. But if you modify the ZOE road car, you take out the rear seats, you redesign the back area so it's a flat load area, you make the rear windows opaque, you get a van. Admittedly not a big one, but a Renault ZOE van, and it's fully homologated to be a commercial vehicle and a van, powered by the same as the car. So 52 kilowatt hour motor, 107 brake horsepower, the R110 motor. It's 245 miles of range, and because so many drivers who are perhaps engineers, or if you think about so many commercial jobs that are done that don't require those men and women to carry a lot of spare parts, like if you're not carrying big bulky spare parts, but maybe just a high-tech set of tools or something like that. Why, so often they are given a van as a work vehicle when they don't need anything as big as that, because they're just carrying around their tools. They have never got passengers in the thing, and they're not carrying around spare tires and 6-foot-long bits of skirting board. So there used to be more of these around. I seem to remember growing up and seeing more cars that were converted into small vans for certain reasons. I think like postal delivery, like local postal deliveries. How many letters and parcels can you really get in the back before you've then got to go back to the depot because you've done your rounds? And so Renault have seen a gap in the market. They've just launched it today. Prices without VAT, because businesses don't pay VAT, or rather they do but claim it back. You can get the car without VAT, so that's 20%. And there's also a thing called the plug-in van grant, and you only get the plug-in van grant if the government do recognise that vehicle as being a pucker van, and of course, like I mentioned, it is. And so it's £19,380, which is just amazing for a car that'll do almost 250 miles. But it's a work van. Well done, Renault, for seeing the gap in the market. I'll pop a link to Autocar in the show notes if you want to see some pictures of the conversion job with no rear seats and what they've done. I'd like to see more car makers do this if there is a market for this, because it's a small, lightweight city car that's going to get you a ton of miles and do it at a really, really good price. Because, you know, EVs... I don't know if this is the case everywhere. In fact, I know it's not the case in America, because I was talking to some US friends yesterday, a very famous EV writer called Tom Mologney. We're talking about used car prices, nyev.com in the US, and just there's some bargains to be had in the US right now with used electric cars. I can't get over how cheap they are there. Goodness me, I definitely wouldn't buy a new car in a million years if I was in the USA, because I'd wait for a car that was 2 or 3 years old coming off lease, and you can get some bargains. Now here, I think I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast, here prices are still really, really strong, and the residuals on used cars are really good as well, because people are just wanting to get into EVs now. And so, you know, if you're a business and you want one of these cars that costs 19 grand, there's going to be no running costs. Normally you'd be buying a van that you got to stick diesel in and change exhausts and filters and oil changes and all sorts. There's very little maintenance on an EV. So over a 3 or 4 year lifespan of a working EV van, very little maintenance, some tyres and some wipers. The fuel is going to be dirt cheap because you charge it overnight when lecky is cheap. And at the end of it, it's probably not going to be worth, you know, terrible money. So say you buy it for 19 and in 3 years' time it's worth 10 grand. You got a work van for 3 grand a year. Unheard of. Amazing. All right, let's move on. Royal Dutch Shell. We don't talk about many oil companies on this podcast. I don't often look at the website worldoil.com, but I was for the research for this story for you. Royal Dutch Shell expects the UK, and the UK can, they say, end the sale of gasoline and diesel vehicles in a single decade, as the nation attempts to eliminate emissions by the middle of the century. According to worldoil.com, the ban can be brought forward. It was going to be 2040, then 2035, but Shell, of all people, Shell saying the UK government should be more proactive and bring the date forward another 5 years and make it 2030. If the government have the right policy and incentives. Sinead Lynch is the head of Shell's operations in Britain, and said on LinkedIn that they just need the right incentives in the UK to do it. It's 5 years earlier than the deadline set by the Prime Minister, and also beats the 2032 date that the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, Tesla Model 3 driver himself, said could be possible to achieve. I think that was on a Radio 4 Today interview. He floated the idea of 2032, and the car industry lost it at him. They're like, we can't possibly do that. Well, now, here you go. Here's a company like Shell putting another 2 years on that and saying 2030, the UK can do it. Europe's biggest oil companies have been preparing for a slowdown in fuel demand and are increasingly turning their attention to electricity production. Well, don't call them a Citroën, they are DS, the electrification strategy of the PSA brand DS automobiles. Don't call them Citroën, provides for an even stronger orientation towards Z mobility from 2025. DS only wants to be offering fully electric cars, or at least cars with a plug socket on. Good old DS. According to Electrive, currently the French have a pure electric car in their range with the DS3. It's called the Crossback E-Tense, and that is basically taking all the technology from the Vauxhall Corsa E and the Peugeot E208. There's a DS4 E-Tense coming before the end of the year. At the beginning of June, it was announced that a DS model, this is the phrase, will be built by Opel Vauxhall from 2021. According to reports, that's going to be the DS4. It's going to be based on a larger platform, so it's going to be a bigger car, the EMP2 platform, but it's still going to have the same electric running gear as all those other PSA group EVs. 50 kilowatt hour battery, 100 kilowatt DC fast charging, and we look forward to seeing that. In Italy, they really, really like their small EVs. Italy's EV market is finally getting hot following months of growth and a tough time with COVID. One of the worst, it was the worst country affected outside of China at the beginning. Electric mobility has now reached the halfway point this year, doubling sales half year to half year, if you like, from 2019 to 2020. Says Clean Technica, market share of hybrids and EVs lags behind other European nations like the UK, France and Germany. The Scandinavian countries are way out in front. However, the Italian market share has doubled to 1.7%, and about 10,000 EVs were sold there. But what are they buying? They're buying the Renault ZOE in first place, the Smart 4.2 and the VW E-Up ! So, in Italy, they like their small EVs. Don't buy many of them, EVs at all. But the market is coming along, and that's great news. From the other end, from one end of the scale to the other end of the scale, headline story today, from cheap city cars to rather more luxurious premium cars. How many Porsche Taycans hit the road in the first half of the year? Well, now, we know the first deliveries of the Taycan started last year, and 2020, therefore, will be the first full production year and delivery year for the Taycan. 4,480 in the first half of the year, says Electrek. Aside from the pandemic, another thing that could have affected the Taycan sales in the first half of the year is the Taycan 4S. Now, the 4S is a cheaper version. I mean, don't use the word Porsche and cheap in the same sentence. A slightly more economical version, which arrived only a couple of months ago. Porsche recently announced the rear-wheel drive version of the Taycan. That brings the base price even lower, but at the minute that's China only. Interesting to see. Obviously, Taycan, super premium car. I mean, if you get jiggy with the options list on the Porsche website, you better have some money in the bank account, because you can spec yourself a very nice car. Still haven't driven one. Nudge, nudge. Anyone who listens to this podcast in the UK fancies adding me to their insurance for about an hour or two. Let's talk General Motors. They've been giving some guidance on what's coming up with their EVs. Well, we know some things. So we know that in 2020, their EV portfolio is going to be getting bigger, and the Chevrolet EV version of the Bolt EV is updated now, launching soon. The Bolt EUV is going to be launching in summer 2021. There's going to be a new Bolt after that in 2022. There's an updated Bolt on the road right now, but a Bolt EUV, which, you know, I know that I've said this on the podcast many times. The Bolt is my kryptonite. It's my blind spot. People email me and be like, you didn't mention the Bolt again. Like, I'm so sorry. It's not available here. It's not even really available in Europe anymore. And so it's such a great EV that goes such a long way. And in many ways, I just forget to talk about it as much as I should. So I'm trying to make an effort more with the Bolt and the Bolt EUV, and I stare at two pictures of them side by side. It's not a great deal of difference, but the Bolt EUV is coming, and then a new Bolt. They, of course, have Super Cruise, the industry's hands-free driver assistance technology if you use it on the highways. In terms of the Cadillac brand, there's going to be a Lyriq coming, Lyriq, and all of the Caddy cars are going to end with IQ. And then production of the GMC Hummer. Now, they're going to be using the new Ultium batteries that GM have co-developed, and the Hummer is expected to begin production at the end of 2021. So we're still a year and a half away from even production beginning at the Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant. There's a Buick SUV, which is a more conventional crossover, and there's a Buick CUV, which they say will feature a more expressive proportion with a greater emphasis on form, is their press release language on that one. So it's good to see some direction and some more guidance on when we get those cars. What about conversions? Have you heard of Lightning Systems? Well, Lightning Systems has introduced an all-electric powertrain for the very popular Ford F550. Yeah, you thought I was going to say Ford F-150. No, the Ford F550. This is, it's a chassis cab, but think, you can put different bodies on top of this. But, I'm thinking school buses, airport shuttle buses, when you park in the cheap car park that's about 4 hours away from the actual airport, and then you get picked up by the free shuttle bus. Like that size of I think is the best way to, if you don't know, describe the Ford F550 chassis cab. So lighting systems do conversions on EVs. Two EVs. Top speed is 65 miles an hour. The battery pack is 128 kilowatt hours. The range is more than 100 miles, depending on the route that it does every day and the weather, etc., says Green Car Congress. It's got all the EV things, even though it's had the diesel engine taken out and an EV powertrain put in. It's got full regen braking to save the friction brakes. It's got a full liquid-cooled lithium-ion battery system, and on DC fast charging, 2.5 hours to full. And in addition to powering the new F550 models, existing trucks, existing shuttle buses can be re-engineered and re-powered. So if you've got one that the engine is a bit knackered on, want to rip out the engine, put an EV system in, get another 10 years life out of the actual body of the thing, Lightning Systems can do that for you. Final story today, a little mention for my UK listeners. Vauxhall has released further details on the panel van that is the Vivaro E. The first factory-built fully electric van from Vauxhall/Opel, £27,723. So yeah, a bit more expensive than the ZOE van that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, but it's a lot bigger than that. This doesn't include VAT, and it does include the plug-in van grant taken off, so the price you'll be paying without VAT is $27,723. No lease numbers yet available, because if you're a business, you're going to be leasing it, I imagine, and so when I get those numbers, I will let you know. British Gas have ordered 1,000 of these things, has 188 miles of range on WLTP. Payload, 1,226 kilos. That's similar to many light commercial vehicles with combustion engines. In fact, it's only 130 kilograms less, I think, than a Vivaro with a diesel engine. Two battery sizes, 75 kilowatt hours, which is 188 miles of range, and the smaller ones are 50 kilowatt hour battery for 125 miles of range. If you don't need to do that range, why carry around more battery and weight than you really need to? Both of them can DC fast charge. The big battery can do 100 kilowatt DC fast charging and getting your battery to 80% in just 30 minutes. It's a lunch break. Have your sandwich and your packet of crisps on your lunch break if you're doing a route in the van, and off you go again. This is brilliant. Again, less than 30 grand for a working vehicle the size of the Vivaro E. I'm pumped about electric vans at the moment, and any kind of electric working vehicle I'm excited about. I'm trying to line up at the moment a Saturday special interview for you in maybe next week or the next couple of weeks, actually, with a company that, if they go electric with their working vehicles, will be probably one of the top 2 or 3 companies in the world in terms of the fleet of cars they have on the road. I'm just going back a bit of back and forth at the moment to try and arrange that interview. I've got so many questions to ask them. I won't jinx it and say who they are. I hope it comes off, because I think that'll be a fascinating interview for you to listen to. And when I get the go-ahead, but if I get the nod, I'll let you know who it is, and you can pump some questions my way, and I'll ask them it's there on the west coast of the US, and obviously a bit of a time difference and stuff we're working out. So if you want to get hold of me anytime about any of the stories that I talk about, the email address is hello@evnewsdaily.com, or leave a comment on the YouTube show. Well, there are 842 previous episodes in the archive, and thank you once again to everyone on Patreon who makes this show happen. It means you can listen for free. If you aren't one of the Patreon supporters yet, have a look at patreon.com, in case you're wondering, .com/EV News Daily to adding your name to the list. Premium partners are Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, Brightsmith Group for clean tech talent, Porsche of the Village in Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, and Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East, and now nationalcarcharging.com and aloharcharge.com. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. And remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.